Looking for a summer camp that will nurture and challenge your students? If so, you need to check out the AD Players Theater Camp. Students will develop acting, script writing, and design skills through a game-based approach focused on creative expression, all while working on an end-of-camp showcase. Campers will thrive in a positive and encouraging environment centered on Christian values. The George Theater is proudly partnering with 3 locations across the city, and each camp is 1 week long, June 9th through August 1st. Space is limited, so sign up today, and scholarships are available. Learn more at adplayers.org/summercamps. The Texas coast is special to me, and my family has made countless memories there. This spring, it's time for you to do the same in Port Aransas. It's a place where family traditions naturally unfold, and you'll find beauty in the island views while taking time to relax between adventures. Just one visit, and you'll see why generations of Texans have anchored their traditions to the island life. Start your new favorite family tradition in Port Aransas, Texas. Plan your visit to Houston's beach at visitportaransas.com. Today on CityCast Houston, we're starting to see real impacts to Houston schools as enrollment plummets in HISD. Plus, some things you may not have thought about are about to get more expensive thanks to Trump. Chron.com's Faith Bugenhagen is here with me to break it down. And hey, after today's conversation, stay tuned because we have a special segment sponsored by AD Players about their summer camp. It's Tuesday, March 4th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Hey, Faith, welcome in. I know we talked about this on Friday about HISD's enrollment dropping. We talked about how 7,400 students are out this year, potentially 8,000 next year, according to the board. But the reason I'm bringing these numbers up again is that now we're getting an impact of these numbers because HISD is proposing to close schools in the summer of 2026. Now, they haven't announced which ones yet, but there are school closures, it looks like, on the horizon. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the fact that HISD is confronting this issue. I know that ever since Mike Miles came in as superintendent, there's been a lot of issues regarding parents and how they feel his leadership is going and the direction of the public school district. So to see this drop in enrollment does not surprise me at all because of that, but it's definitely concerning, especially when you think about the way that Texas public schools are funded, which is based off of student enrollment.
By the way, over 30,000 students have left HISD in the last 5 years. So they are losing money. Like it is at the end of the day, if you only have 300 students and those students are funding that school, you have to make this tough decision of closing schools. Again, when you're funded about $6,000 per student, that's the base. It can go up to $10,000, $12,000. You're going to have to make these tough choices. And we already know schools are so important to neighborhoods with obviously being there for the community, the educational purposes, jobs for the community. This is not good right now.
No, not at all. It's not good, but as you mentioned, there are difficult decisions that come when you see a drop in enrollment, and I think that that's something that's going to be core to the next steps of this plan is to have communication intact so that the parents are aware of why these decisions are being made, which campuses. I know that the locations aren't named yet, like you mentioned. So I think just having that transparency moving forward, I think has been a critique of parents when it comes to Mike Miles' leadership. So it'll be important to see that come to fruition as things play out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, these schools that are being discussed right now, again, we don't know which schools. They won't close until the summer of 2026. So that means these schools are still going to be running for the remainder of this school year, next school year, and then they will be closed and all those students will be placed in a different school. So, it's not like immediate, but it is definitely impactful. And here is where this conversation needs to start. Is it all Mike Miles' fault, right? The superintendent who was put in by the state as the state took over HISD? Probably not, because at least 2 previous superintendents also said that HISD needed to seriously consider closing some schools But now under Mike Miles, we've seen that enrollment drop off even faster. So students are leaving the district and parents are choosing different educational opportunities like private school, charter schools for their students. It's a factor of all of those. But at what point do we start the conversation? Is it worth to have this state take over if this many students are leaving? The budget is being impacted this much, schools are closing, and now you're going to have to make that call. Like, yes, even if Mike Miles and his new education system plan fixes, let's say, 30 schools, but if you're going to be in a huge deficit, is it worth it? Because at some point, there is a breaking point, unfortunately.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that there could be a multitude of reasons as to why this is occurring. We already know that the district has been in a deficit for a while. That deficit is declining, which is noted in the story about these closures. But like you're mentioning, there are a multitude of reasons that could be the case and cause these closures. And it will just be important to see the information come out. As you noted, it's not happening immediately, which I think is important to note when you're looking at these upcoming plans.
Yeah, this end of year can't come fast enough for Mike Miles. And here's what I mean. If scores are improving, if schools are improving, right, and this new education system plan is working at the schools that are currently deploying it, maybe that will build some trust back with parents and potentially teachers and principals who have left. Maybe, right? A lot of teachers and principals have expressed like they don't like working at those schools because this is the curriculum and that is it. Like you are following this. There's not much else you can do, but maybe that's like the only thing I can point to like as a positive if test scores improve, if there is an overwhelming improvement where parents are like, okay, I want my kids at these schools, then maybe the enrollment, picks back up. But ooh, this is tough. This is bad.
It is. It's difficult. It's tough. It's going to affect families. But I think as more information comes out, it will be clearer as to who exactly and what are the details. And I think that's what everyone's going to start looking for and kind of calling on Mike Miles as well as, the trustees to have available to them.
Faith, I want to get to Texas under Trump because we have a lot of stories to talk about how federal policies under President Trump's second presidency are impacting not only Houston, but Texas at large. And I need your help to explain what is happening right now with these federal grants in Harris County.
Yes. So a lot is happening. As you said, we saw Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo have a press conference detailing the fact that Harris County is at risk of losing roughly $600 million in federal funding because of the federal funding freeze. So that freeze is currently on a pause because of a temporary injunction put in place. But as County Judge Lena Hidalgo mentioned, that's not necessarily going to hold in place. And so they're obviously evaluating over at the county what programs could be at risk. I know that Hidalgo mentioned by name the Solar for All initiative, which brings solar power options to low income households. That's obviously significant, especially with issues related to the grid that we've been seeing as these natural disasters pop up every season. So there's a lot that's at stake for Harris County when it does come to this federal funding freeze. And a lot of residents could be affected, as well as the government and the way that the local government is able to function, because we do rely a lot on these federal funds. Like I mentioned, $600 million. And Rodney Ellis also mentioned that about 15 million of that is used per month.
Oh, wow.
So we're looking at a lot to be lost if this does continue to trickle down.
So right now, these programs are still going to operate as put in place, right? And I believe the county is just going to use money from their general fund reserve and then hopefully get that rebate back. So things are still okay right now, but those funds are going to run out. As you mentioned, it's like $15 million a month. So that's 2 months of basically operating room.
Right, exactly. They are still operating as is. And I know that Hidalgo also mentioned during that press conference that they may decide to expedite the funding available that's already been allocated to some of those programs. For example, Solar for All, as I mentioned. But we are at risk of having these operations change pretty swiftly because there's only the money in the bucket that we have available. And once that money dries up, then, we're going to have to look for alternatives. We're going to have to look to potentially cut programs. And that's something that the county officials are kind of evaluating as every single thing changes almost minute by minute and second by second.
Now, is the county fighting back at all with this freeze and, some of the policies that are being passed down from President Trump?
Yeah, so I actually had a conversation with Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee, and we spoke a little bit about that because in early February, he had gone to Commissioner's Court and basically asked the court to approve of his ability and his office's ability to engage in litigation, if need be, on behalf of Harris County toward the Trump administration because of these executive orders like the federal funding freeze coming down from the administration. So that got approved. He has the ability to act on litigation again if need be. And we had a conversation about what that's looking like in his office. So what they have to do is isolate what an executive order even means because of the way that some of these orders are vaguely written. And then they have to evaluate which programs would this affect in the county, if at all, and how they can target whether they need to cut the program, re-examine funding options, or then again engage in potential litigation.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is going to be wild. And by the way, we're speaking with him as well on CityCast Houston because like you, we're curious, like, how is this all going to work? And, they are fighting back, which that's one thing I've seen online that a lot of Democrats have been asking, like, hey, are y'all going to fight back or are we just going to lay down and just go with what's happening? And it looks like there is some fight left with this Democratic Party here in Houston and Texas at large. So make sure you subscribe to the CityCast Houston podcast to hear that interview with Christian Menefee to see how he's going to legally challenge the Trump administration. Spring is approaching and it's time to celebrate the blooming season in Bryan, Texas on April 26th at the Messina Hoff Wine and Roses Fest. This family-friendly festival is all about celebrating our iconic Texas spring with good wine and vines. There's going to be so much to do, like their grape stomp competition. It's a crowd favorite because you can stomp your heart out and compete against teams to become the champion of grape stomping. For those who want something more chill, you can sip on Texas rosé and learn about how it's made. And a great festival isn't complete without fantastic food, so check out the class on food and wine pairings where you can combine robust reds with smoked meats and tangy sauces. Plus, the Vintage House at Messina Hoff is featuring a barbecue buffet with wine pairings selected by the winemaker himself. Celebrate spring in Bryan, Texas at the Messina Hoff Wine and Roses Festival. Check out destinationbryan.com for more information. I love the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, but parking at the rodeo is a hassle. So here's a tip to make your trip there stress-free. All you need to do is make downtown Houston your starting point and jump on the Metro's Red Line, aka the Rodeo Rail. It's so much easier than driving around in traffic by NRG Stadium looking for that perfect parking spot. And make the experience even better by coming to downtown early and exploring what downtown Houston has to offer. From getting a bite at world-class restaurants to grabbing a drink at one of the many hotspots. While you're there, you'll find really helpful Texas-sized rodeo signs guiding you to the nearest light rail where you jump on the red line. And if that's not enough, there's even going to be pop-up rodeo performances along the rodeo rail featuring live music with the next generation of rodeo superstars. To learn more about getting to the rodeo from downtown, Text Downtown Rodeo to 56512. That's Downtown Rodeo to 56512. Downtown Houston is H-Town's original neighborhood, and now it's your starting point for the rodeo. Downtown Houston, get energized and revived. Remember those tariffs that President Trump was threatening to Mexico and Canada, 25% tariffs? Well, he threatened both countries. Then both countries came back and said, all right, we'll discuss this. And there was a 30-day freeze put on those. Now, those 30 days are coming up, and it looks like those tariffs will be put back into place as of this recording. So things are about to get more expensive, right? But I saw that our car insurance is going to go up because of these tariffs. And here's why. Because of all the parts that are made in Mexico and Canada, the steel that obviously is important when you're making cars, and the cars that are being made there as well. If parts get more expensive, then when you have to fix a car after an accident is going to get more expensive because of that tariff. And guess who's going to have to pay for that increase?
You.
Yep.
You yourself.
Yep. It's all being passed down to us. It's one of those things where I thought the whole thing was, inflation is high and the everyday man is getting screwed under the last administration. Yet here we are, we're about to pay more. Eggs are already more expensive, and that is because of the bird flu outbreak. Car insurance is potentially going to be more expensive. There's a prediction that it's going to be 5 to 8% more expensive next year. So what exactly is happening here? This is just unfair. It's so frustrating.
It is definitely frustrating. I also saw that in Texas, it's going to be even more expensive. I believe that it's $79 more than even the national average increase. So that's unfortunate because us Texas residents are going to be impacted even more. But I think you bring up a good point in the fact that President Trump did campaign on decreasing prices and decreasing kind of the everyday cost for us. And some of his moves that he's made or are announcing do the exact opposite, which I don't necessarily know that intention because I am not a part of the administration. But I do think it's interesting to see, and I see how everybody is frustrated because all these costs add up. The cost for eggs, the cost for insurance, all add up and make life less affordable. And we're already struggling trying to get through everyday costs. So to see those accelerate, to your point, is frustrating.
Yeah, and after a long, frustrating day of paying more, if you wanted to crack open a craft beer, that's going to get more expensive as well because of the aluminum that is used to make those craft beer cans. Well, a lot of it comes from where? Mexico and Canada. And of course, a 25% tariff on that aluminum is going to be passed down to you. So if you're like, hey, at the end of this day, I just want a couple of beers, you're going to have to fork out a little bit more money as well. Oh my gosh, Faith.
They're really targeting the simple joys of life when it comes to that. And I think the environmental angle of the effects of that possible tariff will be interesting because I know I read that plastic bottles could be used as an alternative. What happens with plastic? We all know it's not good for the environment. So even seeing, the effects once that goes into place and how that could lead to larger problems, I think is something that would be interesting to explore as we see play out.
That's a great point because Coca-Cola, right, like one of the largest, if not the largest manufacturer of soft drinks, they recently discussed that. Like, well, if aluminum is going to be more expensive, we'll just make more plastic bottles. And guess where plastic bottles go? You talked about it, like the impact on our environment, right? There's that. Like, it's so frustrating. I don't know if this administration is targeting like the basic joys of life. I think they're just making these moves to make a move and show the strength of this administration and have like bargaining power over Mexico and Canada, right? And unfortunately, they're not thinking about the impacts on everyday people. I'm sure there are people in the administration saying like, hey, if we do this, this will rise. But they're probably like, oh, well, guess what? You're going to have to take a little hit here. it's just so frustrating, right? Because everyday people are just trying to survive, right? And especially in Houston, home insurance is more expensive. By the way, have you looked at your fees for electrical? There's so many random fees. Your water, guess what? There's a bunch of fees on there. Auto insurance, that could potentially go up. Eggs are already more expensive. Craft beer, if you want that, is going to be more expensive with these tariffs. So it seems like everybody's benefiting but the everyday person.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, I think that it is more about putting America first and showing off that power, but maybe the nitty-gritty of the effect not
Hmm.
necessarily being evaluated all the time.
Yeah. And then also, there was another cut. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we heard rumors that there were going to be cuts coming to that administration, and it works hand in hand with the National Weather Service. Well, guess what? Late last week, those cuts were officially made, and a bunch of people were fired. We're not sure exactly who and if they were targeting certain people or what roles were targeted, but those cuts were made. And our good friend Matt Lanza, who's been on the show before and is a meteorologist at Space City Weather and also works at Centerpoint, he started tweeting about how these firings could impact the city of Houston. And obviously, the big one is if there are less people working at the National Weather Service and also at the NOAA, again, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that means they're going to be more burnt out. They were already dealing with smaller staffs. Could this be an issue when hurricane season rolls around? Could this be an issue for our smaller counties in our area that depend on these agencies for weather updates, right? There's so much at play here, and it seems like it's another one of those big slashes to the budget where you're like, they're just numbers, but there's actually people that are doing important things for both Republicans and Democrats.
Absolutely. And doing important things for residents too, being Texas residents, being in Houston, you and I both know the impact of natural disasters. And Lanza, as you mentioned, who's also a friend and source of mine, he's so phenomenal at what he does, and he had a great thread explaining the impacts of it on X, and it is devastating when you think of what this means because that those are the people that are getting the information out that genuinely save lives and protect
Yeah.
people, and to see them just slash. I understand that we have to cut, extra costs in the government. I know that there are costs in the government that may not need to be spent, but with this is necessary. This is
Yeah.
everyday lives that are affected.
And Faith, this isn't just like a room full of scientists that are getting fired, right? Like Matt pointed out this really interesting thing that I didn't even think about. He said, I'm gravely concerned about tools breaking that are critical to observations, analysis, and forecasts, and those tools not being repaired in a timely manner as we head into severe and hurricane season. So this will degrade forecasts in all areas, your phone app, meteorologists, and of course, TV. So like, who's going to fix the stuff if it breaks? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I did not think about that either. And it does take a certain set of expertise in order to fix that technology and fix those tools. And as you're mentioning, everybody's reliant who are given the meteorologist
Mhm.
information. So it's difficult when you think of, okay, if that's the case, who's going to fix it? Or there may be the issue of understaffing where there's so few employees that are able to fix that. So they're run dry with
Yeah.
resources and time.
I'll make this point one more time. I've made it before, but this is so important to me, right? If you end up saving, let's say $5 billion with this cut, right? I'm just putting an arbitrary number out there. But because of those cuts, it ends up costing us because of a misforecast or somebody drops the ball, somebody's burnt out. It ends up costing a city $10 billion, $20 billion. Then what's the point? Right? It's something that is not being talked about is like, all right, these cuts are great, right? We want to make sure there's no waste, but if those cuts are just being made without looking at the true impact and it's going to end up costing the US government more in the long run, then what's the point?
That is a good argument to make.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
All right, Faith, it's Tuesday. I want to do an Only in H-Town, and I know you've got one that you're very excited to talk about. Tell me, what is your Only in H-Town?
Tillman Fertitta had his annual San Luis salute in Galveston to celebrate Mardi Gras. It's quite the exclusive event. It was Wizard of Oz themed, Night of Oz themed, which I find so fascinating. And 50 Cent was there, which I did not know. I don't know if you knew this, Raheel. He's apparently a recent Houston resident. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. He's like a full-time Houstonian. He's always at the rodeo. He's at Rockets games. He lives here now. Like this is not a bit. This is not an act. 50 loves Houston.
Which I love to see it because I love Houston. I think us Houstonians are really prideful. But that was lore that I did not realize until reading this article.
Yeah, like he is truly here. And, you know, that big Mardi Gras celebration that he does at the St. Louis every year is the big party of Galveston. I also saw that HPD Chief Noe Diaz was there. UH Chancellor Rena Couture is always at all the big events with Tillman Fertitta. And you know who else was there Friday night for that big party? Now, it was Mardi Gras. We weren't at the actual St. Louis party, and I wasn't there. But the CityCast Houston team was at the parade that goes through the Strand, grand marshaling the 9 p.m. parade. And it was so amazing to see all of the fans out there and the CityCast team. Now, I wasn't there, Faith, because I unfortunately had to get a second knee surgery in the last 6 months on Friday. So I had to miss the parade. Yeah, that's a whole episode on its own. But Laura Isensee, Carleon Jones, Brooke Lewis, and Rochelle Nova, who is such an important contributor to CityCast Houston, they were all holding it down on the float, serving as grand marshals on that Friday night parade. And it was so cool to see the entire CityCast Houston team celebrating Mardi Gras, and then family members were there as well. And if you want to see highlights of this, you can check out our reel on Instagram at CityCast Houston. And a big thank you once again to Mardi Gras Galveston for the invite, to the entire city of Galveston for the hospitality. It was so cool. And hopefully next year I get to be on the float as well.
That is so cool. I'm dying to meet Aunt Rochelle because I love when she's on the show. So I'm upset that I missed her. But that's so fun. And I'm so sorry about your knee surgery because I did see you post about it. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, Raheel, what is going on?
Yeah, you know what? Old age is undefeated. Father Time will beat everyone except for LeBron James, I guess. But yeah, I had to get my second knee surgery. And by the way, if you do want to meet us at a future event, we are going to be at the Houston Rockets versus Atlanta Hawks game on March 25th at Toyota Center for a pregame mixer. We have discounted tickets available with the link in our show notes. So please get those and then come hang out with us before the game and come say hi to everyone. Hopefully I won't be on crutches at that point, so I can have a normal conversation and y'all don't have to make fun of me.
Oh, cool. That's going to be such a fun event. Hopefully I'll be able to be there too. So that sounds super exciting. And I do hope that you're not on crutches because I've been on crutches before. Not fun. Not a fun situation.
No, not at all. Not at all. That was a good way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Faith.
Thank you for having me. I always appreciate it, Raheel.
That was Faith Bugenhagen. I've linked all the stories from today's show in our notes. And while you're there in the show notes, please subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, for even more Houston news, happenings, events, and moments of joy. And of course, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Also, share this episode with 3 friends who love craft beer so they know that, hey, things are about to get a little bit more expensive. And rate and review the podcast if you haven't already. And listeners, don't go anywhere. Here's executive producer Laura Eisensee with Andy Peterson, the Director of Education and Theater for Young Audiences at AD Players, to talk about why their summer camp stands out from the rest.
I'm Laura Eisensee here with Andy Peterson, the Director of Education and Theater for Young Audiences. Andy, I was so excited to hear about AD Players' summer theater camp because I actually did a lot of theater growing up. What makes this theater camp so special?
AD Players, we have a beautiful theater, the George Theater, that's located in the Galleria, and it's a great space. But I know that with Houston traffic, not everybody likes to drive to the Galleria. So we've decided that we were going to go out into the communities where we find the schools and the families and the parents that want to have this experience for their kids. And so we're out in Katy and Sugar Land and in Spring Branch this year. We've gone from 1 camp last summer now to 3 camps this summer. So to me, the most exciting part about this is that we jumped from having the opportunity to serve 240 kids to serving 740 kids in this kind of summertime space here.
Yeah. And, I noticed in how you structure the camp for those 700 kids, which is a huge number, they're all broken into small groups.
Yes.
And by ages. And I was wondering, why was that important to the AD Players theater camp?
A 3rd grader coming into theater, a lot of times they're maybe a little less confident in themselves, or maybe they don't have the same kind of skill set the way a 7th grader or an 8th grader might. So we get together at the very beginning of camp and we do a lot of warm-ups and exercises together. And then we break down into 3rd through 5th and 6th through 8th to give both groups a chance to work with students who are around their level or around their ability. But also this helps them when we do cross-pollinate. The older kids get a chance to kind of help the younger kids, and the younger kids get a chance to see who they might, want to look up to and kind of emulate.
Yeah. And I know from my experience as a former theater kid, it did really help me build that confidence, though the first time on stage was a bit scary.
Yeah.
The camp sounds like such a great mix of acting and writing and design. Can you give us an idea of what campers can expect to do each week?
Oh, absolutely. So they are 1-week day camps, 9 to 3, Monday through Friday. And so what we do is we design kind of our camp to have the whole experience in those 5 days. So Monday, when the campers come to camp, we're getting to know what it means to be an actor, right? The mind, body, and voice. And we're figuring out how to respond and be in the room. Tuesday, we work on a lot of those elements of storytelling. We do a lot of improv games that help build the understanding of character and conflict and obstacle and kind of wants. And on Wednesday, we break our small groups into even smaller groups, and we write a small play with each of the small groups. So they get the basic story, but then they get to change and move things around. Once we get those scripts kind of written, we start to kind of divvy up parts, and then we start rehearsing and we start planning. Thursday, they kind of design costumes and they build Play-Doh models of the set. And then Friday, we build and rehearse to the point of getting a full showcase together so that Friday afternoon, parents and siblings come see this wonderful performance of 4 or 5 short plays linked end to end, and they're a lot of fun. The energy is great. This year, we're doing Fractured Fairy Tales on the first week of camp. Second week is going to be Heroes and Villains. Third week is going to be Adventure Stories, and then we'll repeat that again in July.
Very cool rundown. One other aspect of the camp that I'm curious about is how y'all use games to teach theater skills. Is there an example of a favorite game or activity that you could share?
Oh, sure. One of my favorite games is a game called Bus Stop. We set out 3 chairs and 2 or 3 people, are called up out of our groups, and they are just given a random prop, and they are at the bus stop. So based on what prop that they get, they are going to tell us who they are, where they're going, why they're going, what their day is like. So it's kind of this collaborative storytelling event as the bus comes and picks them up, and each of them gets to change, each and every time. And it gives our other campers, too, one of the great gifts, which is a chance to really listen and think, ooh, that's funny, or ooh, I love the way that he or she said that. I'm going to want to incorporate that into what I'm doing.
Yeah. One last thing I'm curious about is beyond these theater skills or improv and design and the acting, what do you hope kids take away from their camp experience?
Community is absolutely, the bedrock of what we're hoping that these kids take away from our summer camp. And that's why we've gone out into the communities, right? And so this is an opportunity to meet other kids who are in their area and to have, that experience where they got to create something together. There's kind of a bond that's formed, and that is a gift we hope to, give to our campers.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Andy. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks again to Andy Peterson. Check out adplayers.org to learn more. We'll have that link for you in our show notes as well, so you're just a click away. Thanks for listening.
That program sounds so cool. If you want to learn more about AD players and their theater summer camp, check out our show notes. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.
Also, were y'all at the Tillman Fertitta party itself? Okay, I misunderstood your email and I was like, were they invited? I was like, damn, could y'all get me an invite to that?